Hi, I'm Katie Tripp. I work as the Director of Science and Conservation for Save the Manatee Club, and today I'm going to talk to you about an exciting project that's happening literally in my backyard. I'm fortunate to live in the Harbor Oaks community, which is located right on the shores of beautiful Rose Bay. Rose Bay has a long history of local folks trying to do more to protect it and restore it, and right now we're working on a project to advance that restoration even further. Today I'm going to tell you about a community-scale enhancement and restoration project for the Rose Bay watershed. So the watershed that feeds into Rose Bay is actually comprised of 3 urban watersheds that cover more than 5,800 acres. 52% of the land area is developed, with the majority of that, just over 32%, in single-family homes. When you look at the map on the right, you can see orange is the dominant color, and that represents an urban land use. Historically, Rose Bay suffered from a large number of septic tanks, septic inputs, and stormwater. Also, because of an old bridge causeway, there was very little flushing. So if you look at the map in the bottom left-hand corner and you see all those yellow dots, those were the historic locations of septic tanks within the watershed. And the map down in the bottom right with the yellow ovals shows you where those 2 causeways were located. So if you can imagine all of those septic and stormwater inputs and very low flow, you could have very poor water quality and also an accumulation of sediment. So because of these issues, there was prior restoration work done that started in the late 1980s, spanned the 1990s, and into the early 2000s. There was a stormwater retrofit done, septic tanks were replaced with central sewage, and the Harbor Oaks community was brought into the city of Port Orange. That old causeway was removed, and the US 1 causeway was replaced with a bridge, and over 280,000 cubic yards of sediment were removed from the bay. So if you look at the picture in the top right hand side, you can see that where there was previously a causeway on US 1, now it's complete bridging, so you have a lot more flow. And the pictures down on the bottom just show the removal of the old causeway that is now Riverside Drive and used to connect back over across Rose Bay. Improvements after past efforts were noticed. We saw a reduction in total nitrogen and total phosphorus. Both of these maps go from 1992 to 2007. The top graph is the total nitrogen, bottom graph is total phosphorus, and you can see the downward trend in both. And this makes sense. With reduced nutrient inputs and getting rid of that legacy load that was in the bay, you saw the improvement in water quality. Also, with the removement of that muck, we saw reestablishment of a firmer bottom of the bay, which led to healthier subtidal communities. We saw new oysters and new oyster reefs coming in, and also more vegetation on the shoreline, including on the developed side of the bay. However, we still have some remaining challenges in Harbor Oaks and with Rose Bay. There are still exotics, primarily Brazilian pepper, and there's a stand of Australian pine in Spruce Creek Park, which is on the south side of the bay. We do still have stormwater discharges. There are several large canals that were put in by the city to convey stormwater, and then there are also private stormwater discharges that were not put there by any sort of legal means, but contribute nonetheless. Now on the side of the bay that's developed, we have a lot of seawalls, and along those seawalls just bare, grass and other types of landscaping that are not conducive to being right up against the water, because if you're mowing your lawn, you can easily see the clippings going into the bay, which, promotes addition of nutrients, which is undesirable. So our goals with this program are to adopt Harbor Oaks as a model healthy estuary community and really move shoreline restoration to the next level by making it something that's easier for other coastal communities to do on a community-wide scale. We have a number of partners and are always looking for more. So this is just a list of the diversity of folks that are involved. Of course, the community's neighborhood association, our organization, Save the Manatee Club, the Volusia Soil and Water Conservation District. And I will say that I'm personally a member of those top 3. So part of what I think what's helping move the project is just having those connections. And I think when you have a point person who lives in the neighborhood, it can really be helpful. Of course, the City of Port Orange, the Marine Discovery Center, St. Johns River Water Management District, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, our local universities, Project IBIS, which is a Volusia County school program, is involved. So, and as I said, we're always happy to have more partners. So when we look at an aerial view of Rose Bay, we've got the northern, north is to the top and south is to the bottom. So we can see that it's primarily the northern shore of the bay that we're talking about. And we can see the location of existing Brazilian peppers, which is the kind of gold dots. And then anywhere where there's red along the shoreline is a location where we have an opportunity to enhance or restore the shoreline. And so we've got 74 individual parcels here, and the already vegetated shoreline, even if it's a sparsely vegetated area, is about 52% of the linear footage of that segment, and then we have just under 50% of the shoreline that's available for more enhancement, either more dense planting of vegetation or introducing vegetation. So this past summer, we had an intern from the University of Florida who did our shoreline surveys, identifying what was already present, also not just for vegetation, but looking at oysters. And you can see the results of that on this map. Another important part of his work was to establish the width of the intertidal zone along the various parcels so that we would know, because we're planting intertidal oysters and intertidal vegetation, the width of that intertidal zone is important for understanding, basically how much room we have to work with and to plant in. And so if you look at the color here, the narrower intertidal zones are in red, where the widest are in the dark blue. So you could see that a lot of the shoreline has sort of an intermediate intertidal zone, which is not surprising because the presence of the seawalls and the bulkheads basically takes away part of the intertidal zone. So for each of the parcels in phase 1, we are going to be looking at the current condition. Either we have a shoreline that is stable and fully vegetated, in which case there's really nothing for us to do except maybe to provide guidance to the homeowners on how to maintain their living shoreline. For shorelines that are stable but sparsely vegetated, we can enhance with more vegetation and perhaps oysters. If there's a bare shoreline, we can either introduce vegetation and oysters or just vegetation. And then we don't think that there are any actual shorelines that need to be stabilized, but that is something that we'll be checking as part of this project. So basically all the plan components are listed here. We're going to start by removing all of the exotics, working with the city, the county, and DOT to see about making stormwater modifications, and then working with the homeowners to create shoreline buffers in the back 10 feet of their yard, teaching them how to maintain both that and their living shoreline. We continue to pursue grant funding. An important part of this and what is going to make the permitting possible is having a contract signed from each of the participants, each of the landowners, allowing us to work in their yard and pursue this on their behalf. So getting those signatures is important. At that point, we'll be able to secure permits and finish figuring out our timeline. We plan to do this with a lot of volunteer labor and basically divide the community sort of street by street and segment by segment and try to really make the days that we're working a community event. The continuing education and outreach will be important in terms of getting people involved in the project and continuing to get them engaged, and hopefully if there are residents who are kind of holding out or a little reluctant to participate, maybe as they see the project progress and learn more, they'll want to become involved. For our monitoring and for continuing control of exotics, we plan to train interested residents as citizen scientists to help with that effort. And there are any number of student projects that could come out of the restoration phase and then the post-restoration monitoring. The benefits of the project are multiple. This neighborhood has been affected by pretty intense hurricanes the last 2 years. We saw flooding in the neighborhood with both Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma, and so it's a good time to be educating residents about the protection of the shoreline from wake and wind energy that can be provided by these living shorelines. The people live in Harbor Oaks because they love nature and they love the bay. So many of our residents, they fish or they kayak, and so explaining to them that the environment, the wildlife, the fishing is just going to get better the more habitat we provide, and the healthier that we make the water really helps get people involved. And the idea that these living shorelines they're self-sustaining, they're resilient to storms and to sea level rise, which is certainly something that we're grappling with. And the great thing about living shorelines is they continue to get better with time. A hard armored shoreline is the best it's ever going to be on the first day that it's put in. So that's also an important part of the messaging. Outreach is really important to our project, and it's something that I'm very committed to. When we have community events, we always have information about the living shoreline there. We have updates in our newsletters. I've given presentations, to the community, and that was really our first step, was making sure that this is something that the community was supportive of moving forward. So we continue that process, and we're very close to getting ready to start passing out those contracts and getting people signed onto the project. So there's going to be a lot more outreach in the upcoming months. We actually just held our first community work day in October of 2017. This is the time of year when the mangrove seeds are falling off the trees, so we've been collecting seeds and sorting them and potting them so that they'll be ready for us when we've got our permits and we're ready to start the project. So this was exciting. This is a really neat project because it's very accessible. Anyone can scoop up seeds, that have fallen off the trees on the side of the road. I actually used leftover sandbags from hurricane prep as our potting medium, and I'm an avid gardener, so I had no shortage of pots. And so we just, had people over. Our youngest volunteer there in the photo was in 6th grade, and the gentleman next to him was 86. So this really is a kind of project that anyone can help with, and it gives us an opportunity to sit down and talk with each other. And Harbor Oaks is really just a wonderful community in terms of people wanting to be good neighbors and protect our home. So with that, I will ask if there are any questions, and I'm not there to answer them. So if you do have questions, my contact information is on the screen here, and your organizer for today may also have some paper cards that have my contact information on them. So please, if you have any questions, if you'd like to get involved in this project, we're going to have so many events and volunteer days. And also, think about if you can do something like this in your own community. It doesn't have to necessarily be an estuarine community. There are opportunities along lakes and rivers to do this. So thank you for your time.